Wildcard 30 or Wildcard 31, we're going to be discussing all the potential possibilities on Wildcard for a double game week 33 and blank game week 34 as well, discussing all the teams that we need to be looking at with that wildcard. I'm going to be discussing different team situations on whether I would wildcard in a certain situation or not, depending on, as I say, what kind of players you already have in your team, how many free transfers you're in, the current situation that you're in. We're going to be looking at what is the best time to wildcard and what is the best decision to wildcard, and of course who to bring into our wildcard teams as well. As you can see on screen now is a current plan of the potential doubles and blank game weeks that are coming up. Of course, we don't know for concrete what's going to be happening yet. A lot depends on the FA Cup results. Whoever wins in the FA Cup then goes on to double in game week 33 and therefore blanks in 34. Now, there could be some double game weeks beyond that as well. Talking about game week 36, potentially game week 37 as well, for doubles and blank game weeks. We just don't know what's going to happen yet with FA Cup results and kind of also how European competitions get on. There's teams in Europe that are still playing the FA Cup. So there's a lot of things that can still happen later down the line, but really we're going to be focusing, of course, on that double game week in 33 and the blank game week in 34. So the teams that could double in 33, Arsenal could potentially have a double game week. Aston Villa have got a very likely double game week. They also play PSG around that time as well, so you've got to be aware of that in terms of rotation for Aston Villa players if you are going to bring in any Aston Villa players on your wild card. Then as well as that, Bournemouth also could double, and as well as that, there's also Brighton as well that can double in that game week. Crystal Palace could also double as well, and as well as that, Fulham and Man City, and also Southampton and West Ham as well. So there's quite a lot of teams that could potentially double, but as I say, it all depends on who wins in them FA Cup games, which you can see, which, it's going to be, we can't really predict it, we can't really call it until them games have actually taken place. But in terms of teams that we can actually target and we know about, we know that Aston Villa have got a very high likely chance of having a double game week due to the fact that they are playing against Preston. And as well as that, in blank game week 34, or game week 34 right now, they are playing against Man City, who again are also in the FA Cup, and they are playing against Bournemouth. So all it takes is one of either Manchester City to beat Bournemouth or Aston Villa to beat Preston in the FA Cup for that double game week to happen for Aston Villa and Manchester City. So the chance in a double game week for those two right now is very likely. And also not spoken about as well the double game week 32, but with Crystal Palace and Newcastle. Newcastle face Man United and Crystal Palace, and then Crystal Palace face Man City and Newcastle. So that's the ones that we know right now in terms of the most concrete double game weeks. The other ones are kind of like, we just have to kind of predict it. And once we get the results for the FA Cup game, which is before the game week 30 deadline, then we can kind of make our decisions going from there in terms of what players we want to use. If you're currently debating using your wildcard in game week 30, now something we need to actually consider is the fixtures in game week 30, because obviously there's some teams that are playing and got some very nice fixtures going into game week 30. Just pulling it up now, you've got Crystal Palace who are facing Southampton, which we know Crystal Palace obviously double in game week 32. So Crystal Palace assets this week, if you're on a wildcard 30, are obviously going to be very popular. So if you don't have any Crystal Palace assets, in my personal team, I don't. And I'm looking quite concerned now. I've got one free transfer. I've got no Crystal Palace assets in my team at all. And as I say, you're looking at it, they're playing against Southampton away. A lot of people are obviously going to be kind of owning a lot of Crystal Palace players going into this week, looking at the likes of Daniel Munoz, of course. People have Henderson in goal. Then you go into midfield, people will be bringing in Sarr. People might have Eze. And if Mateta's fully fit, people will be having Mateta on their wild card. So that's something there that you're going to be missing out on a lot of points on potentially, because we do expect Crystal Palace to really get past Southampton in that game and put a few goals past them, because Southampton are literally, they're on course to being the worst Premier League team in history right now. The way they're playing, they actually might go on and get it. So you've got players from Crystal Palace there that you might need to be bringing in terms of, as I say, defensive options are good, midfield options are good, and then forward options are good for Crystal Palace. Also, as well, as you can see, the Manchester City do face off against Leicester, which again, Leicester's form right now is absolutely atrocious. They're targeting the relegated teams is just the way to go realistically. You're always going to get, or you're very likely going to get a good amount of points from your players. You've got Erling Haaland, you've got Omar Marmoush, both facing off against that terrible Leicester team and that terrible Leicester defence, which you have to say is a serious opportunity for some points there for the likes of Erling Haaland and Marmoush. And you've also got Gvardiol you can go for at the back as well. So Man City against Leicester looks like a great fixture. And as I say, a lot of people are going to be putting them kind of players in their wild card due to the fact that Manchester City have got a very high likelihood of double game weekend in 33. And then going into, as I say, they got that fixture against Leicester. It's very, very good for Man City. As I said, that's another team, as I say, you will be needing to target. If you're on a wild card, if you don't have if you're not using your wild card, you need to be at least having probably one Man City player for that game against Leicester. But on a wild card, people probably have two, maybe even three Man City players against Leicester. And also, so if you look at game week 30 on wild card teams, you've got Bournemouth, who could also then, if they do beat Manchester City in the FA Cup, which could very well happen, they could also double in game week 33. Then you're looking at it and you're thinking, Bournemouth have got a great fixture in game week 30, at home to Ipswich. One of the fixtures of the week again is, as I say, it's a relegated team from it's a promoted team for the Championship last season. They're in the bottom three. They're losing pretty much week in, week out. And you've got multiple Bournemouth options, which are just so good FPL-wise. You've got Kerkez at the back, who's been very good this season, gets a lot of attacking contributions. He's got 3 assists in his last 3 matches. And then you're looking at it as well, you've got Justin Kluivert, of course. You've also got Evan Nilsson up front. You've got a lot of options there. So you can really pack out your team with options from those three teams that I said that play against the newly promoted teams, looking at Bournemouth, Manchester City, and as well Crystal Palace. So you've got players that you can target in your wildcard, and the chances are these teams could also double again in game week 33. Crystal Palace could also double in 33. We know they double in 32. You've got teams there that could all double game week and all got an amazing fixture this week. So depending on FA Cup results, those are looking at teams that you'll definitely be targeting this week. And I also want to discuss Newcastle assets as well, because we know they're doubling in game week 32 against Man United and Crystal Palace. Alexander Isak's just got to be an absolute lock in your team. If you don't have him, then it is a little bit worrying. You look at that fixture before as well. In game week 31, they face off against Leicester. They've got an unbelievable fixture there, then backs up with a double game week. So you're looking at it and thinking you need to be having Newcastle assets. Alexander Isak is just going to be the number 1 captain option in game week 32. There's no doubt about it. He has obviously 2 fixtures compared to everybody else pretty much who has 1. The only other real captain opportunity will probably be like a Mateta, but you're looking at Crystal Palace a double game week. It's a lot tougher than, for example, to say here, Newcastle and Alexander Isak's double game week. So for me, Alexander Isak's got to be a lock in your team. If you're not wildcarding, you've got to be finding a way to transfer him in for at least game week 31, I'd say, just due to the fact that he's playing Leicester, and a lot of people might even captain him against Leicester in all fairness. So Isak's someone you need to be getting in your team and stocking up on Newcastle assets. If you got your wildcard, you'll be able to wildcard them in game week 31 for that game against Leicester, and then beyond that. But then if you're not using your wildcard, you've got to be probably moving towards an Alexander Isak. And also, as well as say for Crystal Palace, you've got to be moving towards a Daniel Munoz as well. Just because otherwise, these players will absolutely cost you your rank. If they do well and you don't own them, you're on for a serious red arrow in terms of how highly owned Isak's going to be going forward, how highly owned Daniel Munoz are going to be owned going forward. And just discussing the Man City assets as well, because we've got to be talking about captaincy going forward for game week 33. It's got to be something in your consideration. As I say, Manchester City have got a very, very high chance of double game weekend in game week 33. So you've got to be thinking who is going to be that best captain option for game week 33. Who, a lot of people are going to be choosing this captaincy option, and realistically, Erling Haaland could just be that guy. He has a double game week against, so he's going to probably have a double game week against Everton, and then that Aston Villa fixture will get pushed forward to game week 33. So you're saying there that is a pretty decent double against Everton, who have been decent, to be fair, in recent weeks since David Moyes has taken over, in all fairness. But it's not an awful fixture. And then Aston Villa at home. Aston Villa defensively in the Premier League just haven't been good enough over the course of the season. So you're looking at a big opportunity there for some Erling Haaland goals potentially. And as I say, he's going to be heavily captain in game week 33. So you've got to have that in your mind if you're not going to bring in Haaland in your wild card. Or if you're thinking of maybe going for an Omar Marmoush instead, you've just got to be aware that a lot of people will be choosing Erling Haaland captain in game week 33. But that's not to say that you absolutely have to have Haaland, because you really don't. Marmoush is literally like 7 million, 6 million cheaper than Erling Haaland, and he could very well get close to Erling Haaland's points. It wouldn't be an absolute shock if he did, but you'd have to say just for safety, Erling Haaland is definitely the number 1. But as I say, if you want to go for Marmoush, that's fair enough, or you could even go for both if you wanted to. As far as defensive assets, Gvardiol, you've got a good chance of a clean sheet in game week 30. Not sure about the other weeks against United and Palace. They're not absolutely nailed on clean sheets, but then he does double in 33 potentially. And as well as that, Gvardiol has got that attacking potential also going forward. So now looking at my team personally, will I be wildcarding in FPL game week 30? I'm sat in a position where I've got 1 free transfer, and I can't move to Daniel Munoz without getting rid of Kerkez, who's got Ipswich, so it would be a pretty pointless move. And then also, as well as that, I've not got any Crystal Palace assets full stop. I've not got any Newcastle assets full stop. So a wildcard for me could be quite tempting. I've not hit the wildcard yet. I always say, if you're going to wildcard, do it at the start of the week. I haven't done that. I've kind of bottled that one, but I'm looking at my team and thinking, I've got no Crystal Palace assets against Southampton. I've got no Newcastle assets against Brentford, which isn't the end of the world, but just no Alexander Isak isn't ideal. And there's I don't think my team looks bad going into the week. It's just the fact that I've just not really got Crystal Palace assets, which is putting me off. I might just have to take the risk and just go for it without any Palace assets and just hope for the best, and then just save my transfer. Or I might hit the wildcard. I'm going to wait and see for the FA Cup results and see who's going to be doubling. But we won't know exactly when these fixtures will be penciled in. We're just imagining and we're just predicting that it's going to be game week 33, because that's what pretty much it's expected to be. That's the only real way they can fit them in. So we're expecting it to be game week 33, but nothing will be concrete until game week 31. That's why the game week 31 wildcard is a little bit more tempting. But for me, I don't have any Newcastle assets, which isn't ideal. I don't have any Crystal Palace assets for that game against Southampton right now, which again isn't ideal. I have got Erling Haaland, which I'm quite happy with. I don't know where to captain Erling Haaland or Salah. I'll talk about that later on in the week. But a lot depends on them FA Cup results as well. But I've got a double up on Bournemouth against Ipswich. I don't think I'm in an awful position. My team doesn't look bad. You wouldn't say that's a bad team, but then you can easily just say, you don't have any Crystal Palace assets and you're missing that, which is absolutely fair enough. So that's like the one problem with my team, I'd say, at the moment. As for a Game Week 30/Game Week 31 wildcard, obviously, again, this depends on the FA Cup results. I've kind of put players that are going to be targeting the fixtures that we already know are kind of going to be double game weeks. So for example, Crystal Palace, of course, we know are going to be double game week in 32. Could also double game week in 33 as well. So I put Henderson and Munoz in there. Hoyson could also double for Bournemouth. Gvardiol, of course, has got a double game week, a good chance for a double game week in 33 and a nice fixture against Leicester. Then I've gone for double Bournemouth in midfield. I probably wouldn't go for Semenyo, maybe. I'd maybe swap out Semenyo for another, maybe a different midfielder, probably for a similar price. Just due to the fact that Semenyo is on 9 yellow cards currently. Clive, I think, is a lock-in if they double game week Bournemouth. Gordon's currently suspended, but I think he's just the best midfielder for Newcastle going forward. Then you've got Mo Salah, just think has to be in everybody's team realistically, despite not doubling in 33. Then you've got Erling Haaland, who I think, for me, I'd prefer Haaland to Marmoush, but they're both very good, as I say. Then I've got Mateta, who, if he's fit, I think he's a great option for Game Week 30. He'd be an absolute lock if he was 100% fit. Of course, Palace playing the FA Cup before Game Week 30, so we'll actually know if Mateta's going to be fit or not, or like, if he's in the squad, we know he's going to be fine for that game. So keep your eyes peeled for Mateta. And then Alexander Isak, as I say, is an absolute lock-in, as I said before. Double Game Week is then for if I want a bench boost in Game Week 33, or if you want a bench boost in 33. Areola could potentially double in 33. Nottingham Forest could also double if they win their FA Cup game against Brighton. And then Livramento or Dan Burn or someone as well for Newcastle could be a very good option. So that's kind of a wildcard team I'd be looking to. Something around or similar to a wildcard team like that in Game Week 30. So let me know what you think of that team in the comments. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel. It would be very much appreciated. It takes 1 second. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you in the next one.